got to take a breath. Sometimes you got to ground yourself before you hit record on some of these videos. Otherwise, they'll just be a rambling mess for God knows how long. So sometimes you just need to take a breath, ground, and then get started. And that's what that just was. It was also me taking a minute to make sure my recording started, because sometimes I just start talking and half of my recording gets cut off. But alas, let's get moving. Let's get started. I'm ready. I'm excited. And I find that I categorize like a lot of videos that I do for you as important. And I feel like a lot of them are. I think most of the content, at least I hope, most of the content, the majority of the content I put out there is something that you get value out of and is something that's important. But this specific one, for a couple of reasons, I find it to be really important. One, because it's really personal to me. And two, because I feel like there could be another way and it doesn't necessarily have to be the way that it is. But I feel like there's so much that goes on with society, with supposed to culture, with pressure to be perfect and to show up like everything is a-okay, and to never show your flaws and to never be a human being at all whatsoever. God forbid you're a human being. No, thank you. You must be some robot that never showcases or has any issues or has any difficult days or sad days. You just must present yourself as perfect all the time. And this is especially true for women. And I think, and I've had a lot of like thoughts lately about men as well too. And I was actually at a networking event the other day talking to some of the people about the work that I do, and like speaking to men specifically about the work that I do and how I do it, and the fact that I work exclusively with females that identify females. I always say females. Female is assigned at birth. I'm talking about women that identify as empaths. I have to consistently catch myself in this. And my coach actually pointed this out to me the other day. And she was like, just say women, or those who identify as women. But for some reason, I can't get that term out of my mouth. But I'm going to stop rambling on about it and I'm going to move on. But yes, I was speaking to these men about the work that I do with women, and they were like, but what about men? Like, why don't you work with men? Like the things you're describing, I feel like I go through it as well too. This idea that you have to present yourself in such a way that you have to make all the money, that you have to have a good job, that you have to take care of your family, that you can't show emotion, that you can't present yourself like you're weak, and all this stuff. And while men isn't specifically my area of expertise or my niche, if you will, it was validating to know that it's not exclusively women. But I feel like if you are a woman and you are an empath, this impacts you, or highly sensitive, if empathetic doesn't really suit you. If you are someone that's highly sensitive, this idea of needing to be perfect all of the time and never showcasing anything but, and even having a feeling like you have to present yourself in such a way that nothing's ever wrong, to the point where people are like, oh man, you've got it all together all the time, and I wish I could be like you. And these are the things, it's like the feedback you get from other people, and like you're thinking to yourself like, man, I am doing a really good job of faking it till I make it, because in the inside I'm friggin' screaming. But we don't feel safe enough to be vulnerable about these types of things. And I think this idea of presenting perfection all the time and having to wear a mask and like keep your real true self hidden to be something that is deemed acceptable by supposed to culture. And that doesn't just include societal expectations. This also includes your parents' expectations, your job's expectations, your friendships, their expectations. It's like we have this idea that we have to cover up and be anything other than who we are and what we are authentically, to please other people. And again, I'm getting to a point. I know this is a really long way to get to a point, but I mean, who's really surprised by that anyways? It's just kind of who I am. But I think it's important information to have ahead of time, because before we can dive into this topic and why it happens so prevalently and why it needs to get to this and why this is often the catalyst that people reach before they're ready to work with me, I wish it wasn't the case. I wish we were conditioned enough to recognize and notice when things feel like they're going sideways, or when we feel like we're burning out, or we feel like we need help, and be okay with tapping into and accessing that support and asking for help, as opposed to being like, oh, putting on the back burner, like, I'm fine, everything's fine, I should be happy, la la la. And we often should ourselves out of tapping into or accessing the help that we need out of fear of what other people would think. And often I find people thinking or saying like, I should be happy, I shouldn't feel this way, I should be grateful for all the things I have, I shouldn't be comparing myself to all these other people. But the fact is, a lot of these things are still happening, and it's because we're chasing perfection. And again, this video is not about perfection, but it's important context setting us up for the topic of the day, which is, why does it need to get to the point where enough is enough before we make a move to change, where things have to get so bad and feel so uncomfortable and so like awful and challenging for us to recognize, hey, I need to do something differently because this is not working. And where the fear of changing actually feels better than the thought of staying the same. And this is the period I call enough is enough. And before people are ready to work with me, unfortunately, they all have one thing in common, and that they've reached the point where enough is enough. But when you get to the point where enough is enough, that means you're ready. So a lot of times I'll say, you've reached the point, enough is enough. This means you're ready. It took you getting this far to say, something's got to give. I must change. I must do things differently. If I continue on this same path, I'm either going to be wildly unhappy for the rest of my life, or I'm going to burn out, or I'm just going to, follow into a period of depression, and I'm going to give up on life. And this is not where I want any of you to get to. I don't want us as women empaths to get to the point of enough is enough before we recognize I need help, I need support. And I want to validate all of those people that did get to enough is enough, because that's what you needed to experience in order for you to take those steps. But I wish we didn't have to get there. But interestingly enough, our whole lives are made up of these incredible, joyous moments where we're the happiest we've ever been, where we feel the most amazing. Like, we don't necessarily remember like all the day-to-day mundane stuff, we don't really remember that. These aren't the things that we commit to memory. It's those big, big moments that become snapshots in your mind that you commit to memory for the rest of your life. And they tend to be one of two things: incredibly joyous, momentous occasions where you're the happiest you've ever been, or these real challenging, like heartbreaking, crushing moments. These are the things that we remember, and our life is made up of much more than these kind of two things. There's a lot going on in between these two things, but these seem to be the things that really push us in one direction or another. So what I thought I would do is share a little bit about my enough is enough moment. I think I've shared this with a lot of you before, but again, some people are new and some people haven't heard the story before. So I think it bears repeating, because keep in mind, like, I was not always where I am today. The person you see here today is completely different than the person I was 10 years ago. And the person I was 10 years ago was living in victim mentality. I was completely tethered to the past. I was letting it run my life. And now, don't get me wrong, I've worked through a lot of the trauma that I've experienced, but there are still lingering things that I have to work on, that I have to keep chipping away at, that I have to keep addressing and looking at, and I keep being called to look at them, and I have to do little by little, otherwise I'll be overwhelmed. So I have to just sort of do this in pieces. But the person I was then, like, I really thought that life was happening to me, that I was having all of these horrible things happen to me, like I was somewhat deserving of it. I had a lot of shame, guilt, and funnily enough, like, if you looked at me from the outside in, you would never have thought any of this stuff was happening. I was wearing the mask. I would put on the mask and present to the world that everything was wonderful and I was perfect. But deep down inside, I was a freaking mess. I was using substances to cover up the pain. And I want to validate that as well too. If you're somebody that is struggling with addiction, I would say 100% of you are struggling with that addiction because you're covering up some type of pain. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a drug or alcohol addiction. It could be gambling, it could be shopping, it could be scrolling. These are all different addictions that are keeping us from actually being present with what we are experiencing, the pain we are experiencing, or the pain that we have gone through in the past. And it's like, again, supposed to culture tells us that we can't have trauma. We just have to be perfect all the time. And that's why these things are so closely linked. Why it takes enough isn't like to get to the point of enough, that breaking point, that we do anything about it, because we are too busy trying to keep up appearances all the time, trying to keep up with the Joneses. And we just keep pushing and pushing and putting all these thoughts to the back burner and trying to just, get through life. And then meanwhile, you feel like you're living as a victim, like you feel bitter inside and you feel pissed off at the world. And you're like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Why is the world happening to me? You haven't yet begun to understand that you can get back in the driver's seat of your own life, but you have to understand and know the mechanics of what it means to be a human being. And this is stuff they just don't teach you in school. They just teach you to be, really, really heady and using your thoughts and your analytics and all this stuff. We aren't taught to lean into our intuition, to understand in what direction we're being pulled, to listen to our gut instincts, to ask for help and tap into support when we need it. Like we're just taught to go at this alone and pretend everything's a-okay all the time. But that isn't really necessarily reality. And if you want to shift your perspective in life, you have to understand how your thoughts dictate your reality and how much actual control you have over what's going on in your own life. So if you feel like you're spinning out of control, and this is often what leads to that period of enough is enough, or that feeling of enough is enough, is you feel like you're completely spiraling out of control and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Like things are just coming at you left, right, and center. You're being buried by so many different things. Challenges are being thrown at you. You're having difficulties at work. Your kids are a problem. Your husband, your partner, everything becomes problematic to the point where you feel like you're spiraling and nothing feels like it's within your control. And when that happens, of course you're going to feel like a victim. Allow me to validate that for you. Of course you're going to feel like a victim. Like what else would you feel like? You're like, why is this happening to me? But so often, and I say this all the time, like we need to get to that point. We need to feel that discomfort before we do anything differently, because sometimes it's got to feel so challenging and so difficult and so hard before we say, okay, I surrender. Something's got to change, because I can't keep living this way. I can't keep living under the weight of all of this challenge. I feel like I'm being buried by it all, and I can't keep doing this alone. And that is when you reach out for help. But I wish it didn't take that feeling of being buried. And that's a horrible thought to even think or say, but it's what's coming to mind right now. I'm very much speaking intuitively to you right now, because this is so important. And it doesn't need to be this way. It doesn't have to take this, pivotal moment for you to say, something doesn't feel right. Something, like, I don't feel right. I'm not happy. Like, I feel like I should be happy. I feel like I've done everything I'm supposed to do, but I don't feel happy. But I also feel guilty for that. This is the moment when you start to have some of those thoughts where you're like, is this all there is to life? Is this all I'm meant to be? Like, there's got to be more to life than this. Like, is this what I'm destined for, to just do and do and do for everybody else? These are some of those questions and those thoughts. And this is sort of all of the things that all my clients have in common. They start to ask themselves these questions. There's also this element of like, who am I? Who am I? For all my theater kids out there, you will totally get that reference. Maybe there are many of you, but anyways, for those of you that are, you're smiling right now. I know it, but like, that's another thing where you're like, who am I outside of being a mom, an employee, a sister, a daughter, a fiance, a partner? Who am I? Who am I really? Am I on a soul level? Do I even know? Because we've just been trained to float through life and to continue to, walk the path that supposed to culture lays out for us. We're not taught to explore anything further. So before we get to enough where we just can't take it anymore, if you're starting to have those questions come up for you, like, why am I here? Who am I? There's got to be more than life like this. Why am I not happy after doing everything I was told to do? Those kind of four things, they create this crossroads where all of my clients have this similar experience. And that's when they know, for the most part, that we're ready to work together, that you're ready to walk the journey to worthiness, and you're ready to break up with supposed to culture and start to rip off that blindfold. We don't need to let it get to enough is enough. We don't need to let it get there. And it's interesting. I took this whole big tangent, and most of you are probably thinking, I thought she was going to talk about like her own experience with enough is enoughness. Here we are, full circle. This is what tends to happen to me, especially if I don't have notes or if I don't have like something in mind, like things that touch points I want to talk about. I end up going in a million different directions, but that's okay. You'd think I was a Gemini, but I'm not. I'm actually a Cancer, which has nothing to do with this. But anyways, there's also that fun fact about me. But for me, it really did take getting to that, and on paper, I had this most incredible life. I had the house, the car, the most wonderful, perfect fiance, which is why it's important to remember that the way things appear in other people's lives, and this is why you're never wanting to compare yourself to other people, because while they may be presenting themselves this life of perfection and like they have it all together, there could be a lot going on the inside that you really, really don't know. And keeping up this appearance of perfection is the only anchor they have to feel good, to feel better, right? Because the inside world, the internal world is falling apart, and that's all they have. And for me, this was the same. I had this perfect life on paper, but inside I was really, really struggling. I was really struggling with who I was, and I had no understanding of who I was, and I didn't accept anything about myself at all. I hated everything about me, how I spoke, the way I look, my weight, my hair, everything. I hated it all, which is really sad. I feel really bad for like that back then, Denise. I'll just give her like a little hug. because I was really mean to her, but I didn't know any better. I was just buried under all of these feelings. And I remember the night so clearly, the night before I decided I was going to seek counseling, that something had to give. Like, I really was in a bad state, just beside myself in anguish, crying, complete breakdown, complete and utter breakdown. And that was my moment where I'm like, I cannot live my life like this anymore. And the very next day I made a phone call, and that very phone call changed the trajectory of my entire life. I give a lot of credit to my therapist. She was, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be standing here today. I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing. I wouldn't be, she'll probably laugh. Like, I would laugh if my clients gave me all the credit. I'm like, I just came along for the ride. I just supported you and walked alongside you and collaborated with you so that you could discover who you are. And in discovering who you are, you then realize how much potential you have, and you can bring your purpose to life. You can understand what you're here to do and what you're here to, why you're here, right? But it's like when you're buried under all of this other stuff, it's impossible to see that. So I laugh now, but even though I did all the work, I give her a lot of credit, because it was that phone call, it was that relationship that I had with her that allowed me to see the road ahead, that allowed me to finally heal and accept myself and have a lot more self-awareness, and like just the amount of learning I had about me, how the world is, how my brain works, all of that stuff. It started in that moment, but I wish it didn't have to get that far. That's the thing. But I mean, I can look back on it and understand, and this is something that for me, it's like I had to experience all these things. I had to experience it in this particular way. I had to go through this set of specific scenarios to bring me here, because if anything had been different, it would have altered everything completely, and I would have gone a completely different path, right? So I can look at that back on my journey with bondness and say, I had to experience that. It had to look that way. It had to go down that way for me to get here today, because anything different, I would look completely different. Everything would be completely different. But this is not to say this is the path for everybody, but the point of this topic, and the point after 17 and a half minutes that I want to make, is that don't let yourself get to the point of breakdown. It's okay to ask for help. It is okay to need support from other people. It is okay, and it is not selfish to say, I need to do things differently, and I can't do it alone. In fact, I want you to erase the word selfish from your mind, because this work does take a little bit of selfishness. It does take you putting yourself first. It does take you to saying, okay, it's my turn. It is my turn, and it's okay for that. So there is an element of selfishness. So I really want to like soften that word a little bit and have us taking it back, because I think women especially, want to be anything but selfish, and so we just spend our entire lives being selfless. But I want us to reclaim the idea of being a little bit selfish in this case, because you have to be, and that is okay. You are the good kind of selfish, not the bad kind of selfish, whatever that means. But we can rename things, we can take words back, and we can change them and make them our own. But it doesn't have to be this way. And if you're struggling right now, or you're sensing that you're struggling, you're sensing that things don't feel right, and you don't feel happy, and you're not sure why, and you feel like we might be a good fit to work together, let's connect. Let's do a consultation. Let's see where it goes. It doesn't have to be a commitment. It can just be an exploration. So I will leave you with that, and I will leave you for the day. I'm going to go about my day and do a bunch of stuff. But I hope you have a great one. Enjoy the sunshine, and I will see you next time.